Hello, I'm Yuvraj, and I'll be going over some of the basics of Drivebase software in LabVIEW. Alright, so this code sample retrieves the motor called motor name, and it sets its output to 0.5. So in this block, this is the registry Get, and this retrieves the motor reference that has the name of motor name. And note that you would change this to whatever you called the motor. Then this block over here, the set output block, sets the motor output given the motor reference, which is passed along this wire, and a constant, which passes along this wire. And in this case, we're setting the motor output to 0.5. Similar to the previous sample, this one receives a joystick called joystick name and gets the values and takes the axis 0 from these values and sets it to this global variable called joystick value. Using this block, you might recognize this block from the previous slide. It's similar except that it's for the joystick instead of for the motor. But using this block, we get the joystick reference given the joystick name. And again, just like last time, you would want to make sure to change this name depending on the name of the joystick. Then you pass the joystick reference along this wire to this get values block, which, as it sounds, retrieves the values of the joystick. Then this block over here is used to index into the axes. And there are other outputs for a joystick, which come on the right side as well. But for the purpose of this demonstration, we're using the axes, which is passed along this wire. And so then this is indexed, and we take the 0th index from the axes. So we're basically taking the value of the axes, the value at index 0 of the axes array from the joystick. And so then finally, we put this in this demonstrative global variable. And now you can pass this on to other things. For example, you could use this as the motor powers. And note that for both joysticks and motors, you need to open them before you start using them. Alright, so now for some Drivebase blocks. This over here is the registry Get block. And it is used to retrieve a Drivebase reference in similar ways as you had seen in the previous slides with the joystick and the motors. And you retrieve the reference by passing in the name through here, and you can retrieve the reference as output through here. And now for the arcade drive block. So what this does is it converts x-axis and y-axis values to motor powers for the drive base, and then it actually sets the motor powers of the drive base to these values. So you don't actually have to set them separately, it does this for you. And it's based on arcade steering, as you can see in the block. It's the arcade drive block. And so it's quite useful since it does all the converting and motor power setting for you. And you need to make sure to pass in the robot drive reference, which you can get from the previous block, and then the X and Y axis values, which are often retrieved from joystick values, especially in like teleop and all. And now we can put it all together. Recall from 2 slides ago that this is how we get the Drivebase reference. And so we are retrieving the Drivebase reference that's called Drivebase name. And of course, this would change depending on the name that you set for the Drivebase. And you may notice how this kind of looked similar to the code samples towards the beginning of this presentation, where you're passing in a name and you're actually retrieving it from the registry. And so then separately, we're retrieving the joystick X and Y values. For the purpose of this demo, I'm using global double variables, but you could just retrieve these from the joystick directly, depending on your use case. And then finally, we put it all together by passing in the robot drive reference as well as the X and Y joystick values to this arcade drive block, which then determines the motor powers to set the motors to, and then it actually sets those powers. Well, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.